before a girl notices your shoes or how you're dressed, a girl will notice how you smell. Your single biggest weapon in attracting a woman is your selection of fragrance. Today's video is all about men's perfumes, men's fragrances, but specifically for Indian men. There's a lot of rules when it comes to perfumes and fragrances, but they're a little bit altered when we're talking about our country. But before we get to the rules, let's talk a little bit about the science side of things. Two key scientific facts. Firstly, we're talking about olfactory sensitivity. Your olfactory system is related to your sense of smell. And when we're talking about the number of neurons that go into a man's olfactory system and a woman's olfactory system has more than 1.5 times the number of neurons that a man's olfactory system does. So whether you're smelling sweet, whether you're smelling great, or even if you're smelling sweaty, a woman can sniff that out. Which brings me to point number 2. Your olfactory system is directly connected to your limbic system. Your limbic system is a part of your brain associated with long-term memory and emotion. Now, anything you interact with in the outside world is stored as information in your brain. It's just like saving information onto a computer. And odor information about smells is stored in your limbic system. It's stored in your long-term memory and your brain associates that with emotion. Basically, what it means for you as a guy is that if a girl has smelled a certain fragrance on you, she associates that fragrance only with you. By now, it goes without saying that using a fragrance is your #1 style hack in the world. But the biggest issue with fragrances in India is that they're very, very overpriced. They're expensive. You need to invest a lot of money in fragrances. But if you do that, it will elevate your outfit. If you can afford to buy a good quality original fragrance, go for that. But what do you do if you can't afford a good fragrance? The other option, because this is India and at the cost of me losing my future sponsorships, is that in India you'll find these door-to-door salespeople who'll sell you duplicate fragrances, which they claim are made using the same chemical formula used in the originals. Now, that might work for some people, but the downside to using duplicates is that, keep in mind, fragrances are applied on your skin. So if that duplicate fragrance has some kind of a reaction with your skin, if your skin is sensitive to that duplicate fragrance, that might be an issue in the long term. So the solution is that you go and find one of these people, or go and find one of your friends who uses one of these duplicate perfumes. If he has a particular salesperson who he trusts, who he says that, okay, you know, that guy's perfume is completely safe, then you can go for it. But as always, your #1 priority should be safety. And if you're keeping safety as your priority, go for originals. A good quality and budget-friendly perfume in India, if you're buying an original, will come for anywhere between 4,000 to 10,000 rupees for one bottle. And usually in India, in this weather we have, that bottle will last you around 6 months to maybe 9 months. If you use it sparingly, it can go more than that. But using perfumes in India is a whole new game by itself. Desi boys, rule #1 of smelling good: deos are for kids. Why do I say that? First reason, deos are very cheap, fragrances are expensive, and a girl can sniff that out. What you're wearing on yourself, how you smell, says a lot about your personality and even your social status to some women. That's what you want to keep in mind when your game is all about attracting girls. Secondly, you've got to remember that deos smell very sporty, but perfumes on the other hand make you smell a little bit more elegant, classy, even casual. Deos are meant primarily for the gym, but perfumes are meant for everyday use or when you're going out for parties. Every time you're leaving the house, you should go out with a little bit of a perfume on yourself. And the third thing you've got to know, very importantly, deos wear out in Indian weather in like almost an hour. But perfumes on the other hand will stick onto you, will keep letting out that gorgeous fragrance for even up to 8 hours in Indian weather. Now, if we get to talking about rules when it comes to fragrances, keep in mind it's a very detailed, very long topic. It's all about base tones and undertones and all these words you don't really need to know about. What you need to know as a guy, especially if you're someone who's just out of college, you need to make fragrances a part of your life. You need to know how to select a fragrance, and most importantly, you need to know whether or not a fragrance suits you. Also, very importantly, we're brown people. We're not like those white people who live in cold countries and don't sweat as much as us. We live in a hot country, we sweat a lot, and unfortunately for us, we need to use that little extra bit of fragrance. That's what you need to remember. So a lot of Western blogs and Western videos that talk about fragrances, those rules may not apply to us. For example, in the West, they'll tell you just to put a few puffs on your shoulder, a few puffs on your chest, maybe a little bit on your neck, a little bit on your forearm. But if you're an Indian, and if you're an Indian guy who sweats as much as I do, and that's a lot, you need to remember that you need that little extra bit of fragrance, firstly. Secondly, the rules for applying it change heavily. Now, I will take you through what I do, but just keep in mind that you have to come up with your own fragrance system, as I call it. Different guys sweat different amounts. If you're someone who sweats a lot, you might need a few extra puffs of fragrance. But here's the ground rules according to me. Now, what I do is that I always put one puff on each shoulder, one puff in each armpit, one puff on my neck, and very importantly, one puff behind each of my ears. Why do I do that? Because if you're hugging someone, if you're hugging a girl, she can sniff out that fragrance. And finally, you can also go for one puff on the top of your head. Why do I say that? Because the top of your head, the temperature of that region is slightly lower than that of the rest of your body. The higher the temperature of a region, the faster the fragrance will evaporate from that particular region. If you spray a little bit on top of your head, it stays for a little while longer. So if you're entering a room and if it's a strong smelling perfume, people will be able to smell it. Another Western rule is that you should never over apply fragrances because it might overpower the scent of the room. Again, a very Western concept in my opinion. So I feel that you should apply an amount that suits you. You need to figure this over time. The rule that I follow is that you shouldn't feel overpowered by the perfume. Keep in mind there are some perfumes that are stronger than other perfumes. So if you apply too much of that and you feel almost nauseated because of all that strong smelling perfume, that means you're using too much. And finally, coming to actually selecting a fragrance, a very crucial step that a lot of guys look past. Lots of guys get fragrances as gifts and they just end up using that without understanding the purpose of a fragrance. I've always maintained that shoes affect your entire look. They change the look of your entire outfit, and fragrances do exactly that. Now, you might not agree with me, but just remember that when a girl's perceiving you, she's not just perceiving you with her eyes. If you're near enough to her, she's perceiving you with her olfactory system, a sense of smell. So it is affecting your outfit. Now, what you need to understand over time and through your experience of using different fragrances is that different fragrances say different things about you. They convey different moods, different personalities. So when you're selecting a fragrance, you've got to select it according to your personality, according to the outfit you've worn, according to what message you want to convey. That's what I mean by fragrances speak. Different fragrances will say different things about you. So let me explain this with an example. The most commonly used fragrance in India is this fragrance called Davidoff Cool Water. Very commonly used, very good for Indian weather. Why? Because it smells very fresh, very cold almost. When you smell Davidoff Cool Water, it kind of smells like you're smelling someone who's just come out of a shower and used a very strong deo-like soap. That's the message that Davidoff Cool Water conveys. So it's a good contrast in the hot weather we have. But coming to something like Davidoff Champion, which is my favorite perfume, Davidoff Champion is a very party perfume. It comes in two variations, a light variation and a dark variation. The dark variation smells a little bit sweeter. The light variation, in fact, is a little bit more collegey. It kind of makes you smell a little bit younger. Now, I can't go and wear Davidoff Champion in a meeting. You will smell great, but the other person, especially a woman you're interacting with, will perceive you as a slightly younger guy. So if you're going in for a meeting where you want to be a little bit authoritative with everyone you're communicating with, you need to use something a little bit stronger. Davidoff Cool Water would be a better option, but an even better option would be this gorgeous perfume called Givenchy Gentleman Only. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but Gentleman Only has a very strong spice scent. It smells kind of like masala chai. Now you guys would be like, why would I put masala chai on myself? But that strong, spicy, anisey smell, you know, like cloves and cinnamon, that again gives a very strong, manly aroma. Now keep in mind that has its own place. You can't use something like Givenchy gentleman only when you're going to college, because you're going to college, you're dressed in a t-shirt and jeans and you don't want to go with an overly manly aroma. For something like college use, Davidoff Champion, the light version, or Davidoff Cool Water is a great option. But if you're going for a corporate meeting, or if you're going for a party where you want to look a little bit older, where you're dressed up in a shirt or a suit, go for something a little bit classier, a little bit more manly. And that brings me to my final point. How do you actually figure out which perfume you should go for? The most important rule is that everyone has their own scents, and you gotta select a perfume that complements your natural scent. So you should always select a perfume that you yourself like firstly, and secondly, when you're actually going out and buying a perfume, take a woman with you. They have a better sense of smelling and they'll be able to tell you whether or not that perfume suits your personality, whether or not it suits your smell, which is very important. Remember, the long-term key with learning about fragrances or even learning about fashion and dressing is that you learn through experience. You gotta experience things, you gotta make mistakes, you gotta buy fragrances that don't suit you, and that's when you'll boil it down to fragrances that do actually suit you, but more importantly, do actually suit your personality. Remember, invest a little bit extra in that fragrance bottle that can last you up to a year or a year and a half, and take your fashion game as well as your life game to the next level. Now, if you liked today's video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. It's just a like for you, but every like grows my channel a little bit more. So thank you guys for watching, and if you want to learn more about men's style and men's dressing, make sure you check out the men's style playlist on BeerBiceps. And until next time guys, from Ranveer, see you.